Morning, everyone. Commissioner Asim Rahman of Oath, and I'm calling our August 1st, 2024 ECB meeting to order. Thank you all for being here, those in person and those on the screen. Hope you're all having a good day. Council, will you please conduct roll call to verify quorum?
Yes. Commissioner Asim Rahman,
Present.
Shamonda Graham, Joseph Gregory,
Present.
Elizabeth Nauer, present. Madeline Ligori,
Present.
Russell Punis,
Present.
Harminder Paul Rana, Matthew Shade, Thomas Bettner.
Spectator today.
Okay.
All right.
Matthew Smith. Matthew Smith, Scott Higgins in place, Douglas Swan, Lisa Urban here, Jared Whittington.
Present. Thank you.
We have a quorum, 8 out of 13.
Excellent. First order of business of the minutes of the June 13th, 2024 meeting. Does anyone have any questions regarding the minutes? Okay, we're going to have a motion and a second to adopt the minutes. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you very much. Okay. We have a vote, please, for the minutes.
Are there any objections to the motion adopting the minutes of the June 13th, 2024 ECB meeting?
No objection, but I do need to recuse myself as I was not present for the meeting.
Okay, recusal.
I need to recuse myself as well.
And me.
Okay,
I wasn't.
Lisa.
Okay, seeing no objections, hearing no objections, the motion is approved unanimously.
And council, for the roll call, you have Scott Swan and
yes.
Mr. Urban.
Mr. Swan and Ms. Urban, yes.
Perfect. Okay. Minutes are adopted. We'll now move on to pre-sealing reports with Acting Deputy Commissioner Kelly Corso of the Hearings Division. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Kelly Corso here. We have 3 pre-sealing reports today for the board. One of them involves an air code violation. It was for an unpermitted boiler. At the hearing, the respondent presented evidence showing that the boiler has actually been now removed from the premises. So DEP recommended that no further action on this case, and the hearing officer had agreed with DEP. So the hearing officer's recommendation for the air code violation case is no further action for the C&D order. The other 2 reports pertain to noise code violations. One is for a kitchen exhaust system and the other for an air conditioning unit. And at the hearing, at both hearings, the respondent showed that they had done work on the units to bring them into compliance with the noise code, and DEP verified that compliance. So based on respondent's compliance, the hearing officers for those cases recommended that there be no sealing or other action, provided that the initial re-inspections of the equipment show no violations, and that further re-inspections of the equipment show no violations for a period of 180 days. And though that is it.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Any questions for Kelly? Kelly, for purposes of the record, can you identify the 3 cases?
Sure, I just have to pull them up. 1 second. Okay. They are Commissioner versus Orange Grove Ventures LLC, which is C&D number A20220002. That's the first one. The next one is Commissioner versus 753 Classen Avenue Housing Corp., C&D number A20230001. And the final one is Commissioner versus Lot Less NYC Inc. And the cease and desist number for that one is A20230006.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the report? And see a motion. I see a second. We have a vote, please.
Are there any objections to the motion approving the pre-sealing reports? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Great, thank you, everyone. Kelly, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to move to a presentation by Russell Pecunis of DEP regarding the phase out of number 4 fuel oil. And I believe there's a slide deck that it will be presented on the screen.
Did you forward it around or?
I did not.
Oh,
and so this
that
would
would have
be-
been
yeah,
fine. I mean, I've got hard copies that I'm gonna hand out,
Great, thank you.
pass around anyway. But
Oh, sorry.
yeah. I thought I made more copies of this. It's up on the screen. Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. So as those of you who were at the last meeting may recall, we had 10 cease and desist requests at the last board meeting pertaining to buildings that have air code permits from DEP to use number 4 fuel oil. So the purpose of this briefing, which is an amended version of a briefing that we actually gave 10 years ago to the board on number 6 fuel oil when that was being phased out, is to just sort of walk through what's going on, why we're doing this, and then we can proceed to 15 more cease and desist requests that we're making. Basically, the scenario, again, for those who were not at the last meeting, is that these are buildings that have permits for their boilers to burn number 4 fuel oil. The city council, as we'll go through in here, had originally said that you could have a permit to burn number 4 until 2030. However, last year they amended that so that they said that you could no longer have a permit to burn number 4 beyond July 1st of 2027. Since the permits are good for 3 years, and we are now past July 1st of 2024, no one can now renew a permit to use number 4 fuel oil because the end date of that permit would go beyond July 1st of 27. So what we're trying to do is now do enforcement on all of the buildings that have expired permits to use number 4 fuel oil in order to compel them to renew the permits, which in order to do that, they will have to switch to either natural gas if they can get a hookup from Con Ed and they want to go that way, or number 2 fuel. So if we just take a look at the first slide, which just is sort of the statutory history of this. The air code was amended in 2011 to provide that all new permits can only be for natural gas or number 2 fuel oil. Existing permits for 4 or 6 could continue to be renewed. The following year, the code was amended to provide to prohibit renewals of number 6. And it was at that time that we brought a fairly large number of cease and desist requests before the board. I think turned out to be about 100 or 150 altogether, to get people with expired permits to burn number 6 to renew their permits. In order to comply, what most of those people did was convert from 6 to 4, because that was the cheapest thing to do. And as we'll see in a minute, there is the difference between, there is an equipment related difference between using 6 and 4. In July of 2015, there was, everybody was required to get off 6. And then in January 1st of 2030 was the date that was set, as I mentioned, to get off 4. However, last year, local law 32 was passed, and that moved the date up to July 1st of 27. So it moved it up by 2.5 years. The next slide is basically sort of the, I think, Wikipedia definitions of what these different types of fuel oil mean. Number 6, they basically, when they take crude oil and they refine it, they have byproducts as they make different products out of it: gasoline, kerosene, aviation fuel, etc. Number 6 fuel oil is the last thing that's left after they make everything else out of crude oil. And because it is basically extremely thick, if you turned a bottle of it upside down, nothing would happen. It wouldn't move. In order to use number 6 in a boiler, you had to heat it first. So boilers that used number 6 had a heater installed to heat it before it went into the boiler so that it would flow. In order to convert from 6 to 4, people had to remove the heater, so that there was a more substantial expense in converting from 6 to 4. They also had to clean out the tanks, which for buildings that had been using number 6 oil for years and years and decades, involved in many cases actually having to replace the tank, because in a lot of cases, all that was holding the tank together was pretty much the residue inside the tank. To convert now from 4 to 2, in many cases should be much simpler and less expensive, because you won't have to change the equipment at all. You will have to clean the tank, but it shouldn't be anything like the project involved when you were converting from 6, which was just this gunk. And so these are basically just sort of the definitions. And you can see number 2 fuel oil is if you have home heating oil for your house, that's number 2 oil. And as we'll see, as you go from grade to grade to grade, it becomes tremendously less polluting to burn each of these grades. So the next slide, the bullet is just a quote from Council Member Gennaro, who was the chair of the Environmental Protection Committee in the council, about why they did the local law last year to advance the date by 2.5 years, because they just felt that to allow buildings to continue to use this number 4 oil for 2.5 more years was just in view of the effort that the city is making to cut back on fossil fuels in general, to respond to climate change, that to allow this highly polluting fuel to continue to be used for an additional 2.5 years was just something that they sort of reconsidered and decided to move it up by 2.5 years. The photo below, which would be better if it had been printed out in color, but it's in color up there. So that's just bottles of different grades of fuel oil. And you can see that although they're not labeled by which grade they are, the lighter ones, I think the lightest colored one is number 2, and that the darker ones, that 4 and 6 are included in those samples. And again, it's just a matter of during the refining process that the 4 and the 6 have so much more impurity in them that they look dark brown or black. And once you refine it down to number 2, it becomes a much lighter color and you can see through it. And it also will burn much cleaner, which is what the next slide represents. So this slide basically represents of several important pollutants, particulate matter, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and carbon monoxide, and CO2. And it shows that you basically the tonnage of what's being released, which is the top line, how much it reduces when you change from 6 to 4 and then from 6 to 2. And you can see the difference from 4 to 2 would be the difference between the second line and the third line. So getting people off of these fuels represents substantial reductions in all of these pollutants, and the levels of all of these pollutants in the neighborhoods that had a lot of number 6 boilers noticeably and substantially were reduced 10 years ago when we required people to get off of number 6. And we expect those levels to go down substantially again as we require people to get off of number 4 over the next 3 years. The next slide is a slide about the different types of pollution that are caused by burning these fuels, and the fact that particular particulate matter, there's been a lot of news stories lately about studies that are being done about all of the bad things that can result as exposure, from exposure to very small particles. And this will, getting people off of number 4 and onto number 2 and natural gas will help reduce all of these conditions. I think in the quote from Gennaro, he actually mentioned some of the things that, although without specific numbers, about how much this will help in reducing not only deaths, but respiratory illnesses, asthma attacks, etc. And that's actually the next slide, which then talks about some of the illnesses and that can be caused by this type of pollution, and also the number of excess deaths that are caused by particulate matter, and that reducing these levels can result in hundreds of fewer deaths. So that's some of the background as to why we're doing what we're doing. And then the next slide just simply shows that as of July, there are about 2,700 buildings that still have permits to use number 4 fuel oil. About 2,100 of them are current and those will have to convert from to 2 or natural gas as those permits expire over the next 3 years. The other 579 that have expired permits, we are in various stages of issuing summonses to for having expired permits. And over the next 3 years, those buildings within that cohort of 579 that do not come into compliance as a result of being repeatedly summoned will then have cease and desist requests brought before the board to compel them to renew the certificate, which will again compel them to get off of number 4. The last slide shows the city with the black dots representing the locations of these number 4 buildings. And as you can see, there are a scattering of them across Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island, but the vast majority of them are in Manhattan and the Bronx. And this was very similar with number 6. And again, a lot of these buildings are buildings that complied with the number 6 phase out by switching to 4. So again, the number 6 ones were disproportionately in Manhattan and the Bronx, and now the number 4 ones are again disproportionately in Manhattan and the Bronx. So any questions on the PowerPoint?
Peter, we could take down the, any questions for us? Russ, thank you very much. This is very informative and helpful context. I have a question, and that is, since DEP knows there's about 2,700 C of Os that are tied to that particular fuel that eventually will have to be changed over time, I'm just curious if there's any sort of public information campaign to reach out to those various holders who might have a valid permit as of today, but in 2 years from now or 1 year from now, the permit might expire, so they can get a head start on doing what the law requires
Yeah,
of them.
the Bureau of Environmental Compliance is outreaching to all of them in advance of their expiration dates to let them know that their permit cannot be renewed on 4 and that they will have to convert to 2 or natural gas to get it renewed. Again, converting to natural gas depends on Con Edison being able to get a Con Ed hookup. And there are a lot of issues involved with that, and it depends on what part of the city you're in and a lot of other factors. So I think probably most of these will wind up converting to 2 because it doesn't require any cooperation or any interfacing with Con Ed. You can continue to use your current oil supplier. They'll just be delivering a different grade of fuel. And again, unlike from 6 to 4, there are no equipment changes required. It'll just be a matter of cleaning out the tank, and then you can just start using 2.
Okay,
So it's a relatively simple process. So we suspect that that's what the overwhelming majority of them will do. But yes, in advance of their expiration dates, the building owners are being reached out to.
great. Any other questions? Just one note, it's nothing but a suggestion, and so, DEP can take it for what it's worth. What you just outlined is very helpful. The fact that folks will be getting outreach from DEP regarding the need for them to do this change. If a particular entity does not do the change and the agency is interested in seeking a cease and desist or other action from the board, in addition to including the summons in the packet, it might be helpful to include a line saying on such and such date, they were also notified that this
End
need to
result, yeah.
change would take place and that they had an opportunity. It would just, I think, make for a stronger package to show that not only was there a summons, but there was the advance notice so that
Yeah.
no one was caught by surprise.
Yeah, I agree. I will talk to them about that.
Yeah, I understand it might be, it's an additional work to put each of that into, but it's just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't seen what the information packet that they're giving them is, but I'm sure that that can be added to it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so then what we can do is we can proceed to the review of the 10 cease and desist orders that DEP has on the table for today.
15.
Oh, 15, I'm sorry. Today's 15.
Today's, last time was 10, today is 15.
So what I'd like to suggest as a matter of proceeding is that Russ goes through them individually. If there's any questions on individual items, we can raise those questions on a one-by-one basis, but then we'll do a vote on the entirety. And so if any issues come up on individual ones, we can take them out. After he goes through, if you have any general questions that are not about individual cases, but are about the kind of writ large process, we can discuss that as well, but then we can move them through in a single vote. Does that work for everyone? Any concerns?
Okay, so at the last meeting, a question was raised, I forget by who, as to whether the board could be informed as to what these buildings are, what they're used for. So just in terms of the 10 that were approved at the last meeting, one of them is used as a boys and girls club. In this, the rest of them are apartment buildings, which is not probably surprising that most of these are going to be apartment buildings. In this packet, one of them, and unsurprisingly, it's the one for St. Francis of Assisi Roman Catholic Church, is a church building. And the other 14 are residential. Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. There are two. You're right. Well, no, actually, no.
Okay.
So the one for the congregation Beth Elohim, it is an apartment building that is apparently owned by the congregation.
I see.
I did actually specifically look that one up online because one of our interns checked it and said it was residential. And I'm like, that doesn't seem residential. And I looked it up and it is an apartment building adjacent to the synagogue.
Okay.
That is apparently owned by the congregation.
Okay, great. Let's proceed. Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, with regard to these 15 packets and the PowerPoint, I just want to thank one of my interns, Amanda Moore, who did a lot of work putting these requests together and also on the PowerPoint. So thank you, Amanda.
Go ahead.
So again, with regard to all 15 of these are all buildings that have expired permits to use number 4 fuel oil. They have all been issued between 2 and 4 summonses for having an expired certificate. They are all still not in compliance with the requirement to renew the certificate. And on the history page, the second page of each of these requests, in addition to showing the violations that they've been issued and the details related to those, is also the date on which the permit has been expired since. And you will see that some of these have been expired for decades. So we don't know really exactly what's going on with some of these buildings and why a building, boilers usually don't last that long. There's one in here that I think the permit's been expired since 1988. We don't know whether that boiler is even still there. But in order, maybe they just replaced the boiler and never told us. But in order to come into compliance, obviously, they will have to get a current certificate of operation for whatever their current equipment is, to use number 2 or natural gas. So, in addition to getting people off number 4, this is a way of also kind of cleaning up a very small number of buildings that have really been delinquent for a long time in terms of renewing their permits. So if there are any general or individual questions about any of these?
And I apologize, this might have been discussed at the last meeting, so I apologize if
Mhm.
it's
Yep.
redundant, but just as a practical matter, in terms of, I'm trying to think about, you know, if a cease and desist order is issued, and so then now these, as opposed to just having to actually renew their permit or do whatever they would have had to do in the past to renew their permit, these buildings are now faced with changing their equipment in some way. Just how long would the cease and desist order mean that immediately their equipment can no longer be used, and therefore they are scrambling to, I guess, get a temporary boiler?
A cease and desist order will require them to appear at a hearing in front of an oath hearing
Right.
officer. And how long they get, if they don't appear and they default on the cease and desist order, then the order gives us the authority to seal the equipment forthwith. Assuming that they appear for the hearing, then it will be up to the hearing officer how long they get to come into compliance. They'll have to explain to the hearing officer what they're doing in order to come into compliance. And it'll be up to the hearing officer to decide whether they get 3 months or whether they get, you know, whether they get 2 months to report back on what they're doing, or once it becomes a cease and desist hearing, that's basically becomes controlled by the hearing
But
officer.
there's discretion of the hearing officer to give them enough time to actually.
Cease and desist
compliance.
hearings are, I would say, more often than not adjourned at least once,
Mhm.
in order for them to come into compliance. What we would expect them to show, the first time they show up for a cease and desist order, is that they recognize that they must do this and they've started to do something. That they've hired somebody, and assuming that they appear and they make some kind of a showing that they're being responsive to this and that they're going to come into compliance, we would never have an objection to it being to reasonable adjournments in order for them to complete the process of doing it.
And if they were proposing, for example, to do something more intrusive or that will take a longer time, but would actually achieve a lower emissions result for their building, I expect that the hearing officer would use their
If-
discretion to
if-
allow for
Yeah,
that.
if they come into the hearing and they show that they've reached out to Con Ed and they're in the process, we will know, the Bureau of Environmental Compliance will know, I don't specifically know, but they'll know how long natural gas hookups are taking these days. And we would give them an appropriate adjournment or series of adjournments, if they decide that they want to hook up to natural gas, in order for them to do that.
As long as
We
they're showing
would want
progress.
to encourage people to hook up to gas if that's the way they want to go. We would give them time to do that. And I don't know what that time frame is running these days, but I'm sure our air folks know.
Thank you.
And those questions were not asked in that level of detail, so thank you. That was very helpful to know how that would play out. Thank you, Elizabeth. Any other questions? Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, Russ, kind of just, now that you explained the documents in the similar form that they take, just listing out the 15 properties and then
Name,
we'll-
respondent name and address?
yes, okay, right.
Okay, so the 15 properties for which cease and desist orders are being requested are St. Francis of Assisi Roman Catholic Church at 4300 Baychester Avenue in the Bronx, 4554 Park Avenue Housing Development at 4554 Park Avenue in the Bronx, 4535 Park Avenue Realty Corp. At 4535 Park Avenue in the Bronx, FTG Realty Corp. At 3750 Bronx Boulevard in the Bronx, 1840-1850 Phelan LLC at 1850 Phelan Place in the Bronx, 1412 Zarega LLC at 1418 Zarega Avenue in the Bronx, Afsoon Holdings LLC at 1115 College Avenue in the Bronx, East 319 Holdings at 319 East 197th Street in the Bronx, Congregation Beth Elohim at 155 8th Avenue in Brooklyn, 102 East 31st Street LLC at 102 East 31st Street in Manhattan, Hit Zing Li Quan Realty at 101 Lafayette Street in Manhattan, Recchi Realty LLC at 66 West Gun Hill Road in the Bronx, HEO Holding Corp. At 55 East 179th Street in the Bronx, H&A Management LLC at 37 Featherbed Lane in the Bronx, Dino Realty Corp. At 2522 Steinway Street in Queens.
All right, could I have a motion to move to a vote on the DEP's 15 requests to for orders on cease and desist? And we have a motion and we have a second. Please call a vote.
Are there any objections to the motion approving the 15 cease and desist orders? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
All right, thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you for the thorough review, Russ, and we will discuss the next group at the next
Yeah.
meeting.
Mhm.
Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to go into executive session. We have a motion, we have a second, thank you.
Are there any objections to the motion to go into executive session? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay, we'll head into executive session and if
Everybody's good, but or is it recording?
yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Can we return to executive session? I made a mistake. Okay, thank you. Apologies again for that technicality. Are there any further questions or discussions or matters to discuss aside from selecting our next meeting date? Okay, for our next meeting date, which will be in October, we'd like to suggest either October 3 or October 10. How does that work for folks?
The third is Rosh Hashanah.
Oh,
Jewish
okay.
holiday.
And that makes that easy. Is the 10th an available date for folks? Take your time. Thanks.
I might actually be leaving town that day.
Okay. Anyone else have any concerns with the 10th? No?
No issues.
Sorry, Jared. We might, let's
It's okay.
put the 10th down as our
I can
next
miss
meeting
one.
date. All right, I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. There's a motion and a second we have, okay?
Are there any objections to the motion to adjourn the meeting? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Adjourning today's August 1st, 2024 ECB meeting. I look forward to seeing you all on the 10th of October. Thank you very much. We can stop the recording.